so we wanted to have this Google Map concept of where is our process heading, and are we going in the right direction? Are we going to get there in the right time? But we wanted it to look the same everywhere. So what we did is we said, we want to scale statistical process control globally. And when people think about statistical process control as like a modern, scalable digital transformation option, they don't. Because SPC has been around for 100 years. And so we have been doing SPC, but for some reason, our process, we're not all still in control. And we just found that people were doing it in limited fashion. They were all doing SPC a lot of times on their own personal computers, maybe in Minitab or something when they, and maybe a few people would create those graphics whenever they needed them. But what if every signal in your process was on an SPC chart, like a Google Maps, and you had these blue dots when you were going in the right direction, and then when you were outside your upper control or your lower control, they turn red, and you're outside of your lane. And how can you feed your data and your insights in that format and format it the same way for everybody? And so that's what we did, is we created the analytics highway, and then the analytics lens of how you look at all process data. Now, not everything, but about maybe 75% of it. And so we pre-built that. And the way that we were able to do that is we defined that as a goal. And then we went backwards and said, okay, if we want to look at this pressure in this lens, we want to look at this flow in this lens, we want to look at this level in this lens, we want to look at this utilization rate in this lens. How do we do that? And we worked our way backwards. And what we found is that there's a lot of common patterns that you end up finding in these different use cases. So by working your way backwards and you find the patterns, you standardize around the patterns. So the top two patterns are, is your process a batch process or a continuous process? And so we would bucket everything into there. So every time we added a piece of equipment or a unit operation into the hierarchy, you would say, is this batch or is it continuous? Now, sometimes you get into some semi-batch situations, and we have a special case clause that covers that, but 98% were those two things. And then how we grabbed that data would fit into two buckets. So if it's a continuous process, we would sample the data once every hour. And we would typically grab like the averages as a starting place, because we could scale that. We'd say, okay, you already have defined all your instruments and your data in this unit operation. And I want to grab it maybe I want to grab it every 60 minutes as a sample, because I want a long view of my process. We already have our process trends that look at 12 hours of data for our shift, the raw process data signals. That's for us in the Pi Vision system. But we wanted a longer term 3-month look at our process to help us steer and navigate how we're making decisions in, improving yields or production throughput or capacity or quality. So we did that for continuous. And then for the batch, we said, okay, well, we want to monitor all these key inflection points in a batch process. And what we would do is we organize that by the different phases and sequences. So if you have a batch reactor and you have a heat up phase, and then you have a raw material feed phase, and then raw material 2 feed phase, then you have a reaction phase, and then maybe a cool down phase, and then maybe a transfer phase where you're sending it out to the next unit operation. So we would grab and sample the data in those buckets, and then we'd organize all that where we'd have one row of data that's one batch, and it had all this sampled information, and we would compare that against hundreds or thousands of batches. And so then we could look at that level within that phase in a certain context over that batch and the previous batch and the other batch. And by doing that, we put everything into the same lens, and we were, able to pre-generate those. And the benefit of scaling that is the identity and how you formatted the data was two options. And we've done globally, I don't know, thousands and thousands and thousands of unit operations and tens of thousands of equipment in that same way. So that's I could go on and on. We have a deep standard that covers that, but maybe that's helpful for somebody watching.